Well, hi everyone, welcome back. Corey Barker here, and this week we've got a pretty cool trick for creating brushes inside Photoshop. And this is actually something I'd done in Photoshop User Magazine last year, and it's a very interesting way of looking at things a little differently with any photographs you take, whether it's from a phone or a camera or a video camera or whatever. And what we're going to be creating is a fire brush, and it actually came out of an accident. I really had it in mind to do something else, and this just kind of happened and worked out nicely. So it's really a way of thinking about keeping your mind open as you work and just really looking at things a little differently, and you might get some inspiration even from your own work. So what we have here is a photograph of these clouds that I had taken, and I actually took this image with my iPhone because I liked the configuration of the clouds, the texture, and a lot of interesting things happening here. So I took my phone out. I was driving 80 miles an hour and, held my phone out the window and took this picture. Probably not the safest thing in the world, but hey, I needed to get the shot. But my thinking was at the time was I could define this area of these clouds as a brush and then kind of create a cloud brush to make more clouds. Well, didn't work out like I'd hoped, but what I did get after experimenting was something even more interesting. By defining a brush and not getting clouds, but rather getting a fiery explosion effect. Very, very cool. So what we're going to do first is, in this image, when I'm obviously, there's an obstruction. This light pole is in my way, so I'm just going to grab the lasso tool and just very loose selection around that element there. And let's do a simple content-aware fill to go ahead and take care of that area and make everything blend in nicely. Now, the area of the clouds here is all I really need to worry about, so I'm just going to go ahead and crop the image in to that area so I don't have to worry about any of the other elements here in the photo. So we'll zoom that in and we can see that we've got a very interesting cloud configuration happening here. So to define it as a brush, we're going to go over here and open up the Channels palette, because when you define a brush, Photoshop looks at the darkest areas of whatever area you're defining and makes that the most opaque areas of your brush. So anything black will be an 100% opaque brush. Anything with grays will have some transparency, and white will be transparent completely. So we're going to go through and look for the channels that have a fair amount of detail in the cloud area, but with some nice contrast to the background. Not too much, though. I can see the red channel looks good, but there's a little bit too much contrast against the background for what I want here. Green looks pretty good. Blue is almost too light. So it looks like green is going to be my winner here. Now remember what I said about defining a brush. It looks at the dark areas and defines those as the most dense areas of the brush. Now in this case, the lighter areas of the clouds are the areas that I want to define as my brush. But right now they're white. If I define it now, it will ignore that area and only look at the darker areas. So we need to invert the values of this channel. But before we do that, let's go ahead and make a duplicate of that channel by just dragging it down to the new alpha channel icon here. So we got green copy. And what I'm going to do is just go under the image menu to adjustments and choose invert. Now, those areas that I liked of the clouds are now black, and even darker gray areas that are what I'm looking for to define my brush. However, there is a problem. There's a lot of the light gray areas going right to the edge of the document. Now, if I define this image as a brush now, it's going to have that harsh edge on my brush, and it's not going to look very natural looking. So let's just fade the edges with the gradient tool. I'm going to go grab the gradient tool here. And up in the options bar, let's make sure that we're using the foreground to transparent gradient, and we're using a linear gradient. And then we'll just go over here and going to change the blend mode of the gradient tool from normal to overlay. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I draw the gradient over the edges, it will leave some of the darker gray areas alone while forcing the lighter gray areas to white. Now, it may take several passes per side to make sure that the areas get faded all the way in, so there's nothing going right to the edge of the document here. So we'll just kind of get that area there. We'll just do that. So it's got a few scattered elements here, and that looks like it might work pretty well. So now let's go into the edit menu, go down here to define brush preset. And we'll just call it a fire brush, because that is what it's going to be. So now my brush is defined. So let's go over here and open up another document that I've got created here with a black background, of course, so we can see the elements. So let's go and create a new blank layer. And then we're going to go over here and grab the brush tool. And let's go locate the brush we just defined. So we're going into the brush menu up here in the options bar. Go down to the very bottom of the layers, or the brush menu, and there should be the very last brush in the menu here. And if we go in the document, there you can see that my cursor is in the shape of the brush. And if I set my foreground color to white and just dab once, you can see the brush looks pretty good. If I brush around, I can get, I'm just getting a straight symmetrical pattern with the brush, which is okay, but not exactly what I'm looking for. I can also notice that it's probably a little bit more dense than I probably like it to be. So let's go back and redefine it. I'm actually going to do a little bit of a levels adjustment just to lighten that area up a little bit more. Right about like that. And let's go ahead and redefine it. Probably not entirely necessary to redefine it, but sometimes I can get pretty picky. All right. So now let's go back and we'll reselect the new brush. And we're looking that's looking pretty good. Okay. All right. But again, it's painting in that straight symmetrical way. We need to change up the behavior of the brush itself now that we have it defined. So let's go and open up the brush options and add a few elements here. First thing is we're going to activate the shape dynamics. And let's take the size jitter here all the way up to 100%, as well as the angle jitter. Let's take that all the way up to 100% as well. Now, to also give it some variation, you can go down here and turn on or check on the flip X and flip Y jitter settings, and that will allow you to get some variation as you paint. As you can see right there, it's not looking so symmetrical, but I'm getting some variation on the cloud effect. Now, one more thing I'm going to add down here in the brush options is the transfer setting. I want the opacity jitter all the way up to 100% because I want it to vary the opacity. A moment ago, it was just, looking too uniform going across. But as I paint now, it'll give me some variation. And I can build on the effect without it getting too dense too fast. So that's looking pretty good. So let's adjusting. So I'm not going to do any scattering. Let's maybe bring the spacing in a little bit to about 15%, and there we go. That's looking pretty good. Now again, I can always go back and change these brush settings anytime I want. But for now, I think that'll work pretty well. All right. So now on this layer, I'm just going to paint a little bit of the brush there because we're going to add a layer style to give us that fiery look. As you can see right now, this is as far as I got, and then I started painting, and I was thinking, yeah, it doesn't really look like clouds. Probably if I did some tweaking to it, probably could make it look like clouds, but if we just add a simple layer style, or a couple of simple layer styles, to this brush, or to this layer, I'm going to first add an outer glow. And let's set the outer glow to kind of a hot red color. And we'll set the blend mode of this to hard light and increase it up to about 100%. Oh, fully 100%. Then activate inner glow. And this we're going to give more of an orange glow on the inside. And again, we're going to change the blend mode to hard light and increase it to 100%. So now you can see it's giving me kind of a really hot, fiery look to it. Really kind of interesting. And again, it's a layer style. So with anything I introduce onto this layer, it's going to pick up that layer style just like that. So if I go ahead and do a select all and delete, the layer style is still active on this layer, and we're using our newly defined brush. And now I can just go in here and add different elements to get a kind of fiery look about it. So I can add a little explosion down here at the bottom and just have it fan out. You even have a streak of fire just coming from the top and going down. All kinds of cool things you can do with this. And I actually have an element where I have this dude, it's kind of a silhouette image. And if we just kind of paint behind him on that layer, what we can get is kind of an interesting fire element, like there's this wild explosion going on behind this guy. In fact, I'm going to change up behavior of the brush a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of a scatter. There we go. That's looking pretty good. So again, on that layer, I'm just going to start at the bottom and just kind of paint around him. And you can see it just as I paint more on top of it, that fire effect builds up and we get this really kind of cool flowing fire effect made from that cloud image. So you can, point is to really look at your images and look at the elements of your images, and you might, while you might have something else in mind, be open-minded to things that pop up as you're working, and you can discover different things like this very thing. Now, if I go ahead and take my smudge tool, I can actually go in here and just kind of smooth out some of these edges. So to give that fire almost like a sense of motion, just by smearing these sides or so different elements of the fire in here. And ultimately that's going to give me rather interesting fire effect. Now, if it seems like it's too dense, don't necessarily go in there and select all and delete and repaint. Here's a cool trick. If you go in here and just load that active layer as a selection, I'm going to hold down the command key and click right on that layer, loads the whatever's on the layer as a selection, go under select and choose inverse, and then hit delete. So you can see it makes that fire a little bit less. It deletes a large portion of it, making it a little bit more realistic. And again, I can go in there and just smear other elements to get very interesting fire effect from a simple photograph of some clouds with an iPhone.